there's an interesting dichotomy with what's being said. First of all, there was news out this morning that apparently Brett McGurk and a guy named Hochstein have been doing some Middle Eastern diplomacy going around to various places and apparently have a 60-day ceasefire plan that's close to being implemented. Then, oddly enough, yesterday, Naftali Bennett was being asked on I think it was Fox News, about the current situation with Iran. Now, he had been saying prior to the attack that Israel responded to the other day that he wanted the Israeli side to go after the nuclear sites, to go after the energy sites and hit the head of the octopus, as he calls it. Well, that obviously didn't happen. It was a relatively tame, low-level strike that allegedly hit some radars and some other things, but didn't cause that much damage, at least compared to what it could have been. But yesterday, Bennett seems to still be thinking more is to come.
Israel seeks quiet and security in the region. We want peace, but in order to achieve peace, we have to neutralize the source of war and the source of terror, and that's the Islamic Republic of Iran. It's sort of the head of the octopus of terror in the entire Middle East. Where we stand right now is that Israel has severely weakened the arms of the octopus, Hezbollah and Hamas. We've also rendered Iran's ability to defend itself. We've diminished their ability to defend themselves. And now it's time to hit the head of the octopus, the nuclear program and the regime itself.
So he's not even saying if Iran retaliates again. He's just basically saying, like, this is what we need to do next. How do you see this situation shaking out?
Well, I think he's very much aligned with attitudes here in Washington as well as with Mr. Netanyahu. I don't know why anyone expects anything other than some form of escalation at this point. Now, he's arguing that they've had great success against Hamas and Hezbollah. I can't confirm or refute it. I do see a lot of evidence that neither of those fighting formations have been so severely damaged that they cannot continue to fight. As for the ceasefire, I have no idea. We have an ambassador in Lebanon. Her name is Johnson, and she's recently being quoted as encouraging the Lebanese people to turn against Hezbollah and support Israel. Well, there's about as much evidence of that happening as there is that Mount Everest will move to North America. But the same mentality is there. The Romans had an old saying, or the Romans made a desert and called it peace. I think that's really what the Israelis are about right now. They want to make a desert in southern Lebanon. They've got a desert in Gaza. They would like Iran to become a desert, and they may extend that elsewhere into Syria. These things are not changing. There is no end to this strategy as far as I can see. And we have not yet engaged. And there's an expectation that we will become engaged. That's why we maintain all these aircraft carrier battle groups and air forces and so forth in the region. So I think Naftali is on the right track. As for the rest of it, who knows? I don't think they're going to be able to divorce Hezbollah from Iran. If they attack Iran, they're back in business with Hezbollah right away. The same thing is true in Gaza. So I don't know what Hochstein and McGurk are really about. The other thing is the Turks are watching us carefully in northern Iraq and Syria, and we seem to be stirring up the Kurds, we in the Mossad, pushing the Kurds into a conflict with the Turks. And there is discussion now, I'm told, about a Kurdish state emerging from at least part of Syria and potentially part of northern Iraq. That's a red flag. That will bring the Turks into full-scale war, at which point in time the whole game changes. So I don't know about what other people are predicting or whatever they're saying, but this war is not even close to being over. It's really in its early stages. It's going to continue.
And, we talked in the previous segment there about some of the things that the U.S. leaders say, which are just lies or gross exaggerations. That same thing seems to be going on here. First of all, I want to show you what Ambassador Danan, the Israeli ambassador to the United Nations, said and how he responded to a UN Security Council meeting that was requested by Iran in the aftermath of the attack by Israel the other day. And notice how his characterizations of things is not quite like they really are.
Many of my Muslim colleagues know it very well, that today they are targeting our capital. Tomorrow, it can be your capital. Every country within range of their proxies is at risk, and their terror network is global. Two massive missile attacks, first in April, then again in October, each unleashed hundreds of ballistic missiles aimed directly at Israeli civilians. And yet, in the face of the Iranian regime's flagrant acts of aggression, this council has failed to find its moral voice. The usual course calling for de-escalation is not only weak, but profoundly misguided. Iran's regime has been emboldened by each muted response, each call for restraint, each failure to impose real consequences on the Ayatollah. This hypocrisy is not lost on Israel.
You know, a couple of things I want to point out there. First one, he keeps mentioning this aggression by Iran in April and then October with no context at all that both of those came in response to gross Israeli provocations against the destruction of an embassy building in Syria and the assassination in their capital city during the presidential inauguration. And yet he just continues to talk about how those things as though they're coming out of nowhere, and those darn Iranians.
In 1967, Lyndon Johnson told anybody who would listen that if we did not defeat the Viet Cong and the communists in South Vietnam, we would end up fighting them in the streets of Los Angeles. All right. I listened to General John Abizaid in 2004, who was stopped by a journalist, and he said virtually the same thing. If we don't stop terrorism here in Iraq right now and defeat these people, we'll be fighting them in our own country. Well, we have Vietnamese in this country. We have Arabs. Most of them are successful businessmen, but none of them thus far, or I shouldn't say none, but the vast majority are obedient citizens. They work hard, pay their taxes. So we haven't seen this wave of terror that's always being promised. We're being told the same thing. If you don't help us destroy all of our neighbors and everybody that we don't like, all of these people will inevitably come for you. The only way that we've had radical Islamists get into our countries is by letting them in, opening our borders, failing to protect our own citizens and our own society. We are the authors of our own destruction in that case. So this is just nonsense. But this is the same playbook over and over and over again. I hope Americans will wake up and understand that they're being fed lies on every level. We have no interest in a war with the Iranian state. And the notion that somehow or another, if you manage to kill the supreme leader, that suddenly the Iranians are going to stand up and cheer and say, thank you so much. Now we're ready to join with Israel and the United States to take on the rest of the world. You're out of your mind. If anything, we are cultivating stronger Iranian nationalism, and that pulls societies and countries together. It doesn't drive them apart. And if there's any feeling that one can get today from the population in Iran is that no, they don't want a war. Nobody in their right mind wants a war. But on the other hand, they feel they should go after Israel now and be done with it. They're very unhappy with this moderate president who continues to exercise so much restraint. I don't know what's going to happen next, but this war is not over. It's going to continue. And at some point, the United States is going to have to make a decision. How much longer do we foot the bill? We're paying for the Israeli economy, which is being destroyed. We're supplying all the weapons and capabilities that they want. How long can we do this before it somehow or another begins to affect us here? Remember, we've been doing this in Ukraine as well. When does everyone sour on this nonsense?
Well, we wonder when that may happen. And you posed a question a second ago. So you wonder how long it's going to be before people in the United States start waking up to this. Well, apparently that slumber is undisturbed so far, because in that same Security Council meeting, the U.S. Ambassador Greenfield seemed to be reading from the Israeli playbook or their apparently provided talking points.
Colleagues, not even 4 weeks ago, on October 1st, Iran launched nearly 200 ballistic missiles at Israel, with many targeting the country's most populous city, Tel Aviv. This brazen attack had the potential to kill hundreds of civilians, and it very well could have, were it not for the United States military assistance defending Israel at President Biden's direction. In the hours following the barrage, the United States convened G7 leaders, including the leaders of several countries represented here on the Security Council. They agreed there must be serious consequences for Iran.
So why are we talking about there must be serious consequences for Iran when Israel is the one who has initiated every single one of these engagements?
Well, that's what the donors want. And the people in Washington are hostage to the donors with the big money. We got to come to terms with this particular reality. First of all, in defense of this ambassador, and I don't know her personally, I do know from sources close to her that she's very uncomfortable saying these things, that she does not personally believe that. She's doing exactly what you described. She's supporting the narrative. The narrative happens to be concocted in Israel and the CIA and then spread across to the country. That's where it comes from. That's where it is developed. That's what the leadership wants to hear. And remember, we're in an election. So naturally, we have to thank Joe Biden for his foresightedness that brought us into this war with Ukraine and brought us into the war now with Israel against Iran or anybody else that the Israelis don't like. That's all part and parcel of this whole thing. She's not comfortable saying that, though. And I don't see how anybody could be, because we all know it's not true. The assertion that somehow or another the last 180 missiles that were fired at Israel targeted population areas is flat wrong.
Yeah.
On the contrary, they avoided it. They avoided it from the very beginning. They tried not to kill any quote unquote civilians. Now, I don't know what happens in the future, but that's not true.
Well, where could this go? And actually, better question. First of all, to what extent do you think it's the election being now less than a week away that's responsible for us saying all these things that we've seen so far? And will there be a difference on the backside of the election? Will the administration finally find the backbone to say, oh, by the way, here's America's vital national interest, and we're not going to go that direction? Is that possible?
I suppose it's possible. It's possible that Michael Rennie will show up in Washington, D.C. as a representative alien from an alien confederation and tell us we're not alone in the universe, as he did in The Day the Earth Stood Still. Look, no one can predict this, but I see Israel on its way to becoming Ukraine. And that's the last thing we should want. That's the last thing that we should do. The problem is that we are hostage to the donors. The donors think that we and the Israelis can reorganize, reorder, and change the Middle East to suit Israel's preferences, that we can implement a quote-unquote new order. Remember, that's what this is about. The new order is Greater Israel, and that gets bigger with each passing week. But the truth is, it's not attainable. But we haven't figured that out yet. We think we're dealing with backward countries under gutless leaders who will take no risks and do nothing to stop us or Israel. We really believe that. And that's
let me
not
ask
true.
you, if you take the morality out of it for a second, which obviously we keep front and center here because that's supposed to be synonymous with American culture and vital national interest. They're supposed to be inseparable. But for the moment, let's take that out of there. If we just said, okay, Israel, whatever you ask militarily, we're going to give it to you. And Israel goes on and says, all right, we're going to get rid of all of the Palestinians out of the Gaza Strip, possibly all of them out of the West Bank as well. And we're going to take a large portion of southern Lebanon to clear that out as well. Do they have the capacity to do that?
Unless the Turks, for instance, would intervene on the ground, I don't think there's much to stop them. Now, the Iranians, if they're provoked enough, could level much of what we call urbanized Israel with their missile arsenal. They don't want to do that. So I guess the answer to your question is one would think not, but I wouldn't dismiss it as a possibility. You're talking about a regime with a weapons arsenal that includes our own. That's very powerful when you're dealing with countries that, frankly, surrounding Israel, that don't expend very much on military manpower or capability. These are investments that are made on the fly almost. Now, Hezbollah has grown dramatically in response to all of this. And that's why I say Hezbollah is far from finished, not even close. So the answer to your question is, I don't know. It's not impossible, but it seems very unlikely. But we know what we're doing. We know what we're bankrolling. We know what we're supporting. And apparently we think that this new order is going to benefit us. I don't think we're going to get the new order.
And then, of course, you can't take detach the morality out of it. And, our morality is already in tatters because of what we've supported so far in both the Russia-Ukraine war and in this one here. And I just can't think that at some point that doesn't come to really bite us in the butt pretty hard. And there's some trouble on the horizon for the United States if we keep going down this path.
Well, a realist always asks the key question. How do we need to measure what we might gain by our actions by what we might also lose? And that's the problem in Israel right now. They think they're gaining ground and gaining strategic power, but are they? What have they lost in the meantime? And what is actually happening behind the scenes in the rest of the region and around the world? That question is not being seriously examined and answered. We don't care. Washington thinks that, we're on our own planet, frankly, and we don't give a damn what anybody anywhere thinks, and we're very proud of it, sadly. So the Israelis are not on their own planet. They're in a very dangerous part of the world. Have they sorted through this carefully? You tell me. I don't think so.
Doesn't look like it. Looks like they're still operating on primarily wishful thinking and emotions, and that's a really bad combo to base strategy off of. Well, listen, Doug, we'll continue to watch this, and we really appreciate you coming on today. Before we get off the air, anything new coming up with Our Country, Our Choice, especially heading into this election?
Yeah, well, I'm glad you mentioned that. Almost out of breath here, but we're gonna be live on 5 November from Orlando. We're gonna talk about the election. We have some interesting guests, people that are going to show up and talk to us. That includes people who are members, people like Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Judge Napolitano, you, I hope, and others that I don't need to mention right now. I'll be co-hosting it with Natalie Brunel, and she's a lovely woman, and she's very smart, and she's bringing an understanding to the discussion, I think, of economics, and of course, this new digital currency called Bitcoin. I think all of these things are bound up together. We're strapped into a roller coaster right now, and we're going to be riding hard through economic, military, and political troubles for quite some time.
And where do they go to find that? Is that on OCOC.com? Is that where they go?
Well, you can find it on Republic. The Republic platform is probably your best bet. It'll be on YouTube. It'll be on Twitter. It'll be everywhere.
Well, we will make sure that our folks get a list of that before it happens. We'll send out where
Rumble,
that's going to be.
Right. All those places. And like I said, we'll see you too.
We will see you there on Election Day, and a lot of people will be interested around the world in how that one comes out. But in any case, we will be watching it together and look forward to seeing you then. Thanks a lot, Doug.
Hey, thanks, Dan. Bye-bye.
And we appreciate you guys as always. We got a big triple header coming up tomorrow. We got lots of good people. You're not going to want to miss any of those shows. Just watch our channel here. We're going to have Chaz Freeman on at 1 o'clock. Alex of History Legends, and he's got a new video that's going to be coming out on this Lebanon situation. That's going to be fabulous. You're not going to want to miss either his video or his talking about it on our show. It's kind of a world premiere kind of situation. And then another one of our fan faves, Alexander Mercurius of the Duran, on at 3 o'clock. Be sure and tune in at that. Be sure and like and subscribe if you hadn't, but you do not want to miss any of those tomorrow. See you next time on Daniel Davis Deep Dive.